Denis Phillips, chief meteorologist over at ABC Action News, Channel 28, joins us. Denis, great to have you back on the MJ Morning Show.
How you guys doing?
We're doing very well. So I invited you on this morning, and in fact, I popped onto your Denis Phillips live online video stream last night.
Yeah, you were a hit. Everybody's like, MJ. I wasn't really reading the comments, but everybody loved you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So, as you know, yesterday, NOAA came out with was this a new prediction, or was this NOAA's first prediction, adding to the other predictions of like Colorado State University, or was this a revised NOAA or a brand new NOAA?
No, they issued their first one of the season just before the beginning of hurricane season, and then they'll do an update on August 1st, which is always kind of comical, because if it's going well, they'll keep it as is, but if it's lower than average, they'll dump down the prediction a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, this is the first one.
All right, so I wanted to have you on because it just seemed that all the news channels, cable, local, online, it just seemed like an episode of Hurricane Fear Factor yesterday that, NOAA's like dire prediction. NOAA, above normal season, forecasting a range of 17 to 25 total named storms. 8 to 13 are forecast to become hurricanes, including 4 to 7 major hurricanes, which is a category 3, 4, or 5. Denis, what are your thoughts here on this NOAA prediction? And, it just seems that it was a bit aggravating yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I just think these long-range forecasts are pretty much useless. They just don't mean anything because they're not predicting impacts on anybody. They're just predicting what's going to develop. And the big question is, we've talked about this a million times. Look, if there's a lot of storms that develop, but none of them hit anybody, then most people will think, well, it was a quiet year, even if we had 20, 25, 30 named storms, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, it's all about landfall. And there's nobody out there who knows if a storm is going to make landfall anywhere in any spot more than 7 to 10 days out. So NOAA does it in good faith. I know they do. I mean, this whole thing started, you may not know this, but Dr. Bill Gray, who passed away years ago, he used to teach at Colorado State University. And this is how it started. And he figured out there's a relationship between El Nino and the number of storms that develop in a hurricane season. He came up with that idea. And he took it one further, went with, okay, when there's an El Nino, he's going to make a prediction. And they started doing yearly predictions. And the meteorologists that do this, again, they do it in good faith. They're not doing it to try to scare anybody. But the problem is the media picks up on it and just goes crazy, like you said. I just don't think it does anything at all to help prepare people for a season that's coming up. Because if they're predicting lower than normal, then people aren't going to be that prepared. They're going to be like, we're not going to have a big season. If they predict higher than normal and then we don't have a big season, then the next year they're going to be like, but remember last year?
Mm-hmm. All right, so essentially, make sure I have this right. So for us here in Florida and the East Coast, if you have an El Nino year, that tends to be statistically a little bit more favorable for us not to have as much activity, but La Nina is back in the Pacific, and that has the opportunity to create more problems for us?
Yeah, it all boils down to an area of cold water off the coast of South America, in the Pacific. And believe it or not, that has a real impact on not just our hurricane season, but also the Pacific's hurricane season. So when you have this exceptionally warm pool of water off of South America, off of Argentina, that is an El Nino, and it's named El Nino because it used to happen around Christmas time, and the Argentinian anchovy crop would be impacted directly
right.
by how warm or how cold the water was.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It happened at Christmas time, and they named it El Nino for the Christ child because that's kind of how it started. And what happens with an El Nino, you have upper-level winds that are typically unfavorable for storms to develop. So in other words, when you get this big warm water off of Argentina, it impacts the upper-level winds and usually limits the amount of storms that develop. We had that last year. And I'll tell you, it played out that way because even though we had quite a few storms developed last year, none developed in the Caribbean.
I'd like to add a new one. We have El Nino, we have La Nina. I think we ought to add La Prostituta. All right, no,
and how many storms develop when that's the case?
I don't know. I think,
9 months later, they
I think increased cases of chlamydia is what I'm thinking.
It really screws things up, though.
All right, I'm sorry, Dennis. Go ahead.
No, so but this year there's a La Nina. It's the opposite. It's that air, and it isn't. By the way, it isn't like just switch is flipped and boom, all of a sudden you've got this. All it is a warming and cooling of the water in the Pacific. Now that the water's cooling off again, we're trending toward La Nina. It's going to happen in August, September, October-ish is when we're going to get to that point. And usually when you have a La Nina, conditions are much more favorable for development.
What about the fact that they're saying, Dennis, that the Atlantic is like 4 degrees warmer, the Gulf is up to 2 degrees warmer? I mean, clearly, warm water is energy for hurricanes. So if we do get them close by, the warm waters could amplify the intensity?
100%. And that's the thing. Just because the water is going to be warmer does not mean that there's going to be more storms develop. There's a lot more that comes in. Look, if that's all it was, anybody could say, oh, look, well, the water is 2 degrees warmer. We're going to have a lot more storms. There's a lot more that comes into play with this forecast. But, yes, to me, that's the big issue here is the fact that the water has – and by the way, we've had warm water before. It isn't like this is the first time. But what's going to happen is the water is obscenely warm compared to normal, like literally, as you said, 2.5 to 4 degrees higher than average. You throw that in with a La Nina, then all of a sudden, not only are we going to have more storms, but to me, that's the big thing. We're more concerned about that warm water because what happens is, you guys know this, when a storm goes over warm water that runs pretty deep too, not just on the surface, and it does in this case in many spots, you're going to look at what we call rapid intensification. We all know what that is. You go to bed in a storm as a Cat 1, you wake up in a storm as a Cat 3 or a 4. And that's happened on numerous occasions over the last 10 to 15 years. And when it does, it's never a good thing. Because not only do you have a developing storm, one that's getting stronger faster, you get a lot of people that didn't think it was going to be that strong because, oh, well, it's a 1. Floridians normally don't freak out when there's a 1, right? We get ready for it. We know there's going to be some power outages, but we don't normally evacuate. And most of the time we think, well, we can handle that. But the problem is, let's say like with Michael several years ago that was, approaching the Panhandle, it practically overnight it went from a 1 to a 5.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. And that's one of those deals that the folks at the EOC lose all their sleep over, because how do you prepare folks, or more than that, how do you evacuate coastal folks if it was a 1 and then all of a sudden it's a 5 and you're now 24 to 36 hours out? That is the nightmare scenario that most EOC folks are worried about, and that normally only happens when you have rapid intensification, and that normally only happens when it goes over an extremely high water temperature, and that's the one that keeps them up at night.
Now, Dennis, explain rule number 7. This is Dennis has a whole list of rules to follow. Explain rule number 7 to our listeners.
It started out, and you guys remember this, I'm sure, back in 2012, the RNC, the Republican National Convention, was in Tampa.
Yep. And
as it was here, we had a hurricane get really close to our area just as the RNC was about to start. Its name was Isaac. And by the way, those ice storms are the ones that you go back and, ice storms have been rough for a lot of folks in Florida and elsewhere. But
good point. Yeah.
you had Ian, you had Irma, you had Isaac, there's just been a ton of them. And so anyway, 2012, the RNC is happening. This storm is coming close, and everybody's freaking out. They were talking about moving the RNC to Jacksonville because of this hurricane.
Yeah.
And I just knew it wasn't going to be a huge deal for us. So I developed, literally in about a 5-minute stretch, I sat down and created these rules for this one particular storm. Whatever the margin of error was, things changed. Don't worry about it. At the end of the day, rule number 7 was don't freak out unless I'm freaking out. We're fine. And I was talking about Isaac. Well, so you know how that things like this happen. Sometimes things just kind of take a life of their own, and as silly as it is, for whatever reason, with this storm, it turned into any storm. Dennis, is it a rule number 7? Or should we be freaking out? And that's kind of how it is now. And I say it, somewhat in jest, but look, it's I don't care what the storm is. If you're freaking out, you're not going to be able to make the right decisions for your family to keep you and your family safe anyway. So it's a good place to start, where if you're prepared in advance, and everybody who's listening to this show has heard it a million times, it only takes one. We have to prepare like this is going to be the year. I've said this on air and on my show a million times, and I don't want this to come back and bite me in the butt, because it's not, but statistically speaking, if you go back and look at the numbers, and the numbers don't lie, I mean, they are what they are. It's been over 100 years since the Bay Area has been hit directly by a major hurricane. 103 years.
1921, was it?
Correct. And it was in October, no less.
Yep.
And
well, we've always learned that for us, we're more likely to have hurricane activity affecting us on the west coast of Florida in October. It's the late September, Octobers that we generally have to worry about.
Yeah, and it all makes sense. There's a reason for this. You can make the argument. I mean, I see it both ways, but you can make the argument that our immediate area in west central Florida is not prone to be hit by a major hurricane. But we all know we're going to get one at some point. I mean, look, we're going to. If you live in Florida and you think you're going to bypass getting a hurricane, you've got your head stuck in the sand. We're going to get one at some point. But you can make the argument, because hurricanes, as all low pressure, the stronger low pressure gets, the more likely it's going to be drawn northward toward the poles. This is what happens, right? So if you get a storm coming in from our south, which is our worst case scenario, one that moves between Cuba and the Yucatan, it's going to want to go north. The Panhandle, you can absolutely make the argument, is a hurricane-prone area. The Outer Banks of the Carolinas is a hurricane-prone area. New Orleans West is a hurricane-prone area, because these are areas that, as the storm gets stronger, it'll be drawn more toward those areas. For us, we talk about an October storm. Why is it more likely? Because what brings a storm into our area? A trough or a front coming in from the south, or from the north, rather. How many fronts do we get in August or July or early September? Not too many.
It's later that the troughs drop from the north and starts pushing them, I guess, making it more favorable for us.
Yeah, they turn into Florida.
Yep.
That'll kick them from the southwest to the northeast.
Yep.
So there's a lot of meteorological proof and truth to the fact that maybe our area is not a prone area for major hurricanes. Now, I'll tell you.
Tell our insurance companies that.
Well, this is true, right?
What a mess.
Yeah. But the problem is there's a lot of other areas that are. And I think we all know, the rates, that's just the way it works, is if someone else gets hit, the entire state still pays for it.
Right.
And I mean, that's just the way it works. And lastly, with these storms, I'm talking about major hurricanes. You look at, statistically speaking, 1 out of every 4 years, a hurricane comes within 50 miles of our coastline. Now, it's not a major storm, but it's a Cat 1. You go back and look at the numbers. 1 out of every 4 years, a hurricane, Cat 1, or a tropical storm gets within 50 miles of our area. So, look, at some point our luck is going to run out. I don't say that to hype it, because I get so ticked off seeing everything on social now. This is the one, and you show a model that's 10 days out, and the models 10 days out are useless. So, it really irritates me, but it'd be crazy to think that we're not at some point going to get one. It's going to happen. So,
well, Dennis, I hope we're not talking to you about this and a potential bearing down of a named storm on our area this season. I want to just keep kicking the can down the road.
I'm with you. And there's a lot of folks that put their faith in on the Indian burial grounds and Safety Harbor and St. Nicholas and Tarpon Springs.
And Indian Rocks Beach,
And the 2001 spaceship on Dale Mabry.
But if it's working, hey, I'm okay with it. But I mean, we hope people get ready early June. because, typically June, even though there might be a storm that forms, let me tell you, we've had several times where we've had tropical storms end our droughts because they show up in June. June storms are rarely, if ever, particularly strong. So we've already said that June might be a little more active, but that doesn't mean active for anything that's going to be all that devastating. July, most of the time, is still rather quiet. Things historically don't get ramped up until mid-August until the end of October. I mean, that's kind of the time. So these long-range predictions, to me, they're useless. They're a waste of time because they either give people a false sense of security, which can blow up in their face if you get one storm. I mean, we say this example.
Yeah, only takes one.
Yeah, I mean, and look at 1992. It was a quiet year. The A storm did not even form until the middle of August.
Yep.
So it was a quiet year. But yet, if you tell people that Hurricane Andrew was a quiet year in South Florida, they would beg to differ with you. So it just takes one. You get ready now. You don't want to be that guy going to Home Depot and Lowe's 2 days out trying to find anything you can to get your house ready, because that's what happens when you wait too long.
Get ready now. Denis Phillips, I hope we do not talk to you for the rest of the season. At least about hurricanes and tropical storms. That's always great to have you on, but I'd rather talk about other things like your crazy Christmas light display or something. You know?
I'm already getting ready to put those out right now.
Right.
Probably.
But listen, if something happens, we're here. No one does hurricane coverage on the radio better than the MJ Morning Show here on Q105. Dennis, I hope I'm just having dinner with you for the next 6-7 months or so, and not and not talking to you on the show. So Dennis,
good to me.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I can, I do want to mention tomorrow afternoon, Safety Harbor, the Crooked Thumb. They're debuting our Rule Number 7 Pale Ale for the year. Portions of the proceeds go to the American Red Cross. And we have a meet and greet where I had a chance to meet lots and lots of people. So again, Safety Harbor tomorrow, Crooked Thumb, 3 to 5. Come on out and say hi and put down a cold one. And again, proceeds go toward the Red Cross.
All right, Crooked Thumb, Safety Harbor tomorrow, 3 to 5. Go meet Denis Phillips.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll try to get out there this year. Why I couldn't come last year for some reason.
You were sick.
You're on a plane.
Sick.
Where was I last year?
Aren't you on a plane tomorrow?
You will be on a plane tomorrow. Oh, no,
Well,
Sunday.
who says I'm leaving tomorrow? I might be able to go tomorrow.
Okay,
There you go. I don't
care.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think something came up.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Dennis, thank you, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
See ya.
Dennis.
Bye-bye. All right, Denis
Bye.
Phillips, ABC Action
Yeah.
News, chief meteorologist, and I hope we don't have to talk to him about hurricanes and tropical storms
Boy.
at all this season.
Do you guys talk about anything else besides weather when you go to dinner?
Yeah, of
Of
course we do.
Dennis is an
Oh,
interesting
of
person,
course,
but
yeah.
I do
Worried about
love
Dennis.
listening to him talk about
Denis can talk for hours.
hurricane season rules, safe words. It just gets me right and relaxes
You
me.
can just go and go.
All right, hang on. Michelle's calling me. Yeah, because we were supposed to go to the revelation of this new ale at the Crooked Thumb. We were supposed to go last
fun.
year, and we couldn't make it. Hang on a minute. Michelle just called me on the cell phone, so she probably has the real story on why we didn't make it last year. Hang on. Let me buzz her quickly here. Folks, we got $1,000 to give away in just a bit. Another $1,000, the final one. Hey, Michelle.
Hello.
Yeah, I saw you just called me. So, did you want to weigh in on the Crooked Thumb?
We couldn't go because you had kidney stones. We were actually going to go,
Oh, that's right.
and then you had your procedure. I think like that Thursday.
Oh yeah, that's right. Last year I was having miserable kidney stones, and that's right. I was incapacitated.
Yep. But you know what? I was looking for a plan for the weekend, so now I know what we're doing.
I guess we're going to Safety Harbor on
We are.
Saturday
Stop.
tomorrow, 3 to
Stop.
5. So hey, go see Denis Phillips and see me drink a Sprite. No.
That's about right.
No, I'm not a beer drinker, but listen, maybe and we can go to the Nona Slice House and get some pizza too.
Wow, what a
Like I just
weekend.
said,
That's what
we're
we'll.
making 2 stops.
All right, there we go.
Whoa.
All right, we'll see you in Safety Harbor tomorrow, folks.